Okay, it's 5 after. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Please let me know if you guys can hear me on the Q&A box. Okay. Well, good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on ITSM plus ITOM Better Together. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Ilse. I'm the Marketing Director at FlyForm, and I'm joined today by Mark Revill. He's the Senior Advisory Solutions Consultant at ServiceNow, and Phil Davies, Co-founder and CEO at FlyForm. Today, Mark and Phil will discuss the benefits of integrating ITSM and ITOM to increase operational efficiency, and they will also be showing you a live demo of ServiceNow. As you can see on your screen, there's a poll question right now, and we'll be conducting a few poll questions during the presentation. And please feel free to participate in them by just using your mouse and clicking directly on the webinar window. The webinar will be recorded, and you will receive the access link via email. If you have any questions, please enter them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and I will get to them at the end of the presentation. Also, stick around until the end of the webinar, as Phil will be sharing with you some of the best practices on integrating ITOM and ITSM seamlessly. And without any further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Phil, and I will be back for the Q&A portion of the webinar.
Thanks, Ilse. So, hi, everybody. First of all, thank you for joining today and happy Thursday. So, as Ilse said, my name's Phil Davies. I'm the co-founder and CEO at FlyForm. And as I just said, thank you for joining. We're grateful for you to take the time out of your day today to come and hear a little bit about the ITSM and ITOM journey in ServiceNow. I assume that most of the participants know who ServiceNow and possibly we are, but we'll just do a quick recap. So, ServiceNow makes work better for people. Our cloud-based platform and solutions deliver digital experiences that help people do their best work. So ServiceNow are a market leader in this industry with a 47% market share globally in the ITSM space. They currently have revenues in excess of $2 billion a year and were recently named most innovative company in the world by Forbes. FlyForm, we provide the ultimate ServiceNow partner experience. We're a premier UK-based ServiceNow partner. We founded in 2015 by former ServiceNow customers and consultants. We were designed and created with best practice in mind and a true partner relationship. We are a boutique consultancy and we specialize only in ServiceNow services, and our client satisfaction rating is currently 9.8 out of 10. Our goal is simple, which is to help our clients deliver exceptional service through the power of ServiceNow. Moving on to some of the content of today's webinar. So our agenda, just in case you haven't seen it, we're covering the introduction now. We'll then move on to a presentation by Mark Revill regarding the IT trends and challenges currently being seen in the marketplace. And then we'll talk about why ITSM and ITOM are better together. Following that presentation, we'll move into a demo of the live product, which Mark will also kindly host. And finally, moving into a best practice and implementation guide with myself. Following the last slide section, we'll then go into an interactive Q&A for any of your questions. So thank you very much again for joining, and I'll now hand you over to Mark.
Thanks for that, Phil. As we discussed, I'm going to do two parts of this webinar. The first area is really going to just be introducing ITOM and ITSM, and specifically around the Better Together story. Then I'll be doing a very quick demo as well, just to show what it is, how it all fits together, and just a simple process of how to basically reduce the outages that you have and manage them better. So what we tend to see at the moment from a priority perspective, and this slide really shows you the high level, is the CIOs have certain priorities at the moment. Digital transformation is one, and obviously this is plays quite key into what ServiceNow offers from the platform perspective. We also want to start to be clever at the way we do things. So using things like machine learning allows processes to be a lot quicker, to be a little bit more automated from that side of things as well. And then finally, from a cloud adoption perspective, the cloud is treated more and more as just really another data center. So taking on the cloud, allowing applications to run both on-premise and in the cloud as well, is one of the key things to be able to reduce costs and to allow better flexibility, especially when you're trying to change and transform the business. It's a lot quicker to be able to do some of the elements by using the cloud a lot simpler and a lot easier. So from our perspective, what we are looking at doing is seeing that some of the figures that we've looked at from a digital transformation perspective shows that there's quite a key payback in terms of being able to do this and what that particular focus is. So the number of CIs wanting to do this is starting to increase, and a lot of them are already starting or well down the journey to be able to go and improve their way that they take the approach for IT and business together. And what you'll see as we go through this particular element is it's all about being able to do this a lot quicker, a lot simpler, automate processes, be more business orientated. So not necessarily in an IT silo, but talking about how we can work better with the business from that perspective. Now, just taking a small step back, companies tend to invest in a lot of tools to be able to monitor and manage their applications, from network monitoring, ITSM tools, server monitoring, looking at end user performance monitoring, which is becoming more and more popular. What you tend to see though is these are quite siloed. And because these are quite siloed, you still tend to get these newspaper reports all the time, probably every day or certainly every other day, where there's been a major outage or something like that. So why is that happening? You potentially bought all the tools, you potentially got that visibility into it. And that's where you tend to see this particular issue, is although there's the tools, there's not necessarily the processes. Those tools tend to be quite siloed. Yeah, so although you have the visibility, you only have the visibility into one particular part of it. And that's really where we start to look at what's happening. Because in reality, operations get lots of events coming in. Some of those events are just noise. Some of those are important, but how do you actually prioritize if you don't really understand necessarily the different perspectives coming from different tools and the way that particular CIs, servers, databases, etc. interact with the business services, which are ultimately what you're trying to support. And it's not standing still. More and more IT, you're getting more Internet of Things starting to interact with business systems. And this makes this even more complex and more difficult to be able to manage. So as we start to see these grow, as we start to see quicker release cycles of new applications and new functionality, both for internal and for external consumer-facing customers, it becomes really hard to be able to prioritize. And it takes time to be able to correlate and prioritize issues and understand really what is business critical that I need to sort out straight away. So what we're trying to create is this way that the operations can actually accelerate the business by allowing these issues to be able to be resolved quickly and allowing things to be able to be moved on and have less effect on the end users. This can include things like better automation, better processes, but also allowing you to start to remediate issues before they potentially become a problem that's actually going to affect the business. So there's three things we need to be able to look at from this perspective. We need to be able to understand what the visibility is of everything across an operational estate. And that visibility is down to the depth and detail of particular CIs, but understanding some of that, the health and understanding of the business services from that higher level, because that's the best way to be able to prioritize which issues need to be able to look at first. But also again, insights into be able to optimize some of the business efficiencies. And that optimization can be using automation, getting things resolved quickly, understanding how well you're using cloud-based resources, because They're not free, like some people seem to think. There is a cost to them, and be able to understand the way you utilize those better will help, again, a business efficiency perspective. But from a service perspective, we need to understand how all this matches together. And service management and operations management should not be siloed. They have slightly different approaches, but they can all feed information off each other to make the whole process a lot better. So from a service management perspective, and then again, from our perspective, all of this is on a single platform. So it's a single database, it's a single system of record. So from a ServiceNow perspective, one of the key areas to be able to make this as effective and as efficient as possible is ensuring that your CMDB is up to date. So not only does it have all the required details in it, but those details are up to date. There's no point in having done this, let's say 2-3 months ago, because things change, especially when you're getting into a more cloud and elastic-based environment. So we need to be able to go off and discover CIs. We need to do that on a regular basis and then keep the CMDB up to date from that perspective. And that's one part that we can do with our operations management. The other elements is be able to start to take some of this data when you're getting events in there, creating alerts off the back of those. Alerts are meaningful. They're things that you can act on, whereas events tend to be everything that's coming in. You can understand them, you can correlate them together, but ultimately alerts are really, from a ServiceNow perspective, what we want to manage. All this will help not only increase the effectiveness and efficiencies, it will mean that potentially the more you automate this, the less you have people ringing up and phoning as a problem, because you already know about it and already be trying to fix and manage it. But also from a service management perspective, it gives the incident service desk teams a heads up, it gives them more information. The tickets can be have more enrichment of data in there. And from a flip side, when you're doing things like change management from an ITSM side of things, then by understanding the way that's working with an operational perspective, having that up-to-date CMDB, having the application dependency view will allow you to understand the way that works and understand the way things are. But more importantly, if you change one thing, what is it actually going to affect in terms of business service perspective? So again, understanding the way all that works together is quite key. And there's a journey you can go on to be able to do this. And this is a sort of journey that I tend to talk about quite a bit. So the first element we really talked about, so establish that centralized CMDB on ServiceNow, single system of record, everything can share it. Yeah. And we're talking very much around IT today, but it's not just all about IT. So the CMDB can be used for security operations, it can be used for governance, risk and compliance. It can be used in many different areas, depending on how your business functions and the regulations that you need to follow. Once you've got that centralized CMDB, then you discover the infrastructure. You can also discover and understand what business services you've got out there. So you can do simple application dependency mapping to understand what different areas are talking to each other, but also you can go to a depth that's even deeper, which is going into things like service mapping, where you've specifically focused on a business service and you're drilling down from that start view, which might be an end user going in through a URL or a web service coming in to the particular environment, and following that through the various stages. Once you've got that understanding, you can understand the business service, you can understand the different CIs that make up that business service, and then you can start to populate and process data more effectively. So the next thing you want to be able to do is bring in some of these issues that you've got. So all those event management engines that you have out there, all the event and monitoring engines that you have out there, those are still needed. Those are still key. The problem has been in the past is that it's tended to be siloed. So there'll be some for the database, some for networks, some for certain types of servers, some for Windows servers, etc., etc. By bringing all of that into a single place to be able to understand, correlate, understand what's noise, understand what's important, then within that, and then overlay that on top of the CMDB, you can start to understand more informed of how to be able to manage the response. So this is where you can automatically, for example, create an incident. You can automatically go off and run a bit of orchestration to bring back more information, such as some logs, to be able to enrich the experience from an incident perspective to help manage that issue better. And once you start understanding the way these things are, and where you start getting repeats and possibly using some of the machine learning to be able to say, when I saw this last time, this is what the effect was. So I'm 90% or 60%, confident that that will be the same result again, it gives you more heads up. You've got some root cause analysis in there. You've got the ability to be more proactive, potentially resolving issues before they cause an issue. And this is where things like automated remediation comes in. So if you've got something where there's always this fixed process that you follow to be able to resolve it, let's say if it's a SQL server that's down and you just restart the service, or an Apache server, if that's what you do to bring that up, then why have that as a manual task where there's always going to be the lag for somebody to actually go off and do that when you can actually automate that? So again, by using automated remediation, you can start to automate these processes. You can fix them quicker. If they need to go through the change process, then you can tie that directly into the same platform, using the change process to raise an emergency change, which will get approved very quickly to be able to do this. So again, you're tying this very simply into one single place to do it. And then finally, you need to understand, what am I doing? Is it right? Am I making an impression? Is it making a difference? And this is where you get that single view across the IT operations and services to be able to understand, am I resolving these problems quicker? Have I got certain business services which are starting to fail more? So I need to start to look at why they're failing and understand what that is. Maybe put some different automated remediation in. Maybe write some knowledge documents so that the process that, if we can't remediate it, the process that a operator follows to resolve it is exactly the same in all cases, so that you don't get knowledge within people's heads which is slightly different and potentially cause other issues. Plus the fact you can start to understand where you've got things like changes taking place, how much are they starting to affect the uptime, and if they're starting to affect outages within business services. So what potentially happens before? So if you had the process before and you were potentially using ServiceNow, then what you'd normally get is somebody would tell you there's an incident, because you might not necessarily know straight away there's an incident, because all the monitoring tools are quite siloed and no one's seeing any particular correlation to it being part of a business service. It's just a CI that's got an issue. So then you get the user actually telling you you've got a problem, and they'll either raise it as an incident through a service portal, or if they've not got one of those, they'll go and either phone up or raise an incident through email. Then you might have one person doing that, you might have 100 people doing that. Then what you tend to get is you don't know what the prioritization is, you don't know what the effect is on the business service. So it tends to go off to who we think might be the problem. So potentially the networks, potentially the database people, potentially the server. And you have this manual firefighting that's going off, or potentially understanding and talking about that it's not my problem, there's nothing wrong here, etc. So that's all time wasted. And actually, one of the statistics in a company I've worked for previously, we talked about the issue of the mean time to resolution. 70% of that time was actually finding out where the problem was in the first place, not actually resolving the issue. And that's where things like this manual fighting just takes so long. So when you start to then understand what that is, you'll then go to an instant triage. And this will potentially be done through email, it'll be done through phone, you might have conference calls. It's not kept or monitored or understood in a single place. You've not got the backing up of the certain information that's shared amongst everybody. Again, it tends to be within those silos. Now, ultimately, you will get it resolved. There'll be a manual recovery, there'll be some closure notification, and there probably won't be a review on it because the information's in so many different places. It's not easy to be able to review why the problem happened in the first place. That's led to an extended downtime, potentially a business impact, potentially if it's a consumer-facing website, that's got itself into the newspapers as well. So what's a better way to do it? So a better way to do it is be able to automatically route. So for example, from an event, automatically create a incident that's automatically routed and start to be able to work on this straight away. The same though, even if there is still some manual raising of it, being able to automatically route this to the right person first time. Be able to identify the impact, understand what the problem is, look at it from a business service, categorize it in the correct way. If you've got 2 P1s, which do I prioritize? Understand what the impact is, that is really key. And then start doing some automation. So if you can go off and bring some logs back, if you can go off and bring some more data back, you're enriching the data that people have manually in the past gone to be able to find. All of that is kept in a single place. So when you then want to be able to do this single system of action to be able to get the collaboration, it's all in one place. You can start to look at that data. If you need to go over and get change control, emergency change control done, you can get that done very simply. It's all in one place. And then finally, the more you can start to automate resolutions, the less you'll have time down. And if you can start to then use the machine learning within ServiceNow to be able to understand how problems are occurring, you can actually be more proactive and start to resolve problems before they happen. A good example might be that the system keeps failing because it keeps running out of memory, and there's a problem with the JVM. That might not be resolved overnight. So being able to put some automated resolution in, which just very quickly kicks off garbage collection, for example, that will potentially resolve the problem. There might be a pause in the application for a second, but it won't go down. And ultimately, the business service is kept up and running. And again, notifications, letting people know. So you've not got 15 people ringing up the service day to say there's a problem. They can all see there's a problem because it's been made visible through the service portal. And then when it's resolved, again, it's made visible through the service portal, through a mobile notification, etc. So what we've seen from some of our customers, and this is in a report that was done last year by Forrester called the Total Economic Impact for ServiceNow. It's available off the servicenow.com website if you want to take a look at it. I think there's about 3 on some different topics. So for example, in this case, where we started to use this, we've seen 25% less P1 outages. We've seen thousands of hours saved per month by automating and making the prioritization better from that perspective. We've also seen efficiency gains from tier 1 technicians because they'll be able to do more of what they need to do rather than some of the simplistic work, which could have been covered very simply by somebody just running through a knowledge document or, again, automating it. And then from a downtime perspective, we've seen not only cost savings in terms of hours, but also annual savings in terms of any issues that's particularly happened around various industries. So from a ServiceNow perspective, we bring all of this together. So we're not just talking about the bit in the middle, which is the IT operations management bit around discovery, service mapping, event management. We're also looking at tying that into the single system of record, instant problem change. You've got all the fundamental part of the platform, which is managing all this across. And then you've got the reporting, you've got the knowledge that you can make into knowledge documents that you can share amongst people within the IT infrastructure. And there's dashboards that you can make available to, for example, to the business service users so they understand how things are going, how things are running. So it's all about making IT work better with the business. It's all about this transformation of IT from a digital perspective. One of the other areas that we talk about with ServiceNow is that user experience. Yeah? So allowing people to be able to help themselves. Allowing those not just about the end user, it's also about the fulfillers and the operators, making their lives easier, giving them the tools that allow them to resolve problems easier, taking some of that mundane work away by automating it is really quite key. Not only does it make their life easier, it makes their life more fulfilling, but also it will save costs in the long run, as we can see for the example on the side here. So quickly just going through this, and I'll just go into a demo in a minute. This is an example of where we see these priority and these issues and understanding what's happening. So again, we're not looking at this, you'll see from these charts, these are not CIs that we're looking at the moment, it's actually business services that have been named on this. The size, the color will differentiate what the prioritization is and what the impact is from that perspective. So again, by understanding what we can see, we can prioritize a lot simpler than we have done before. But we're not reliant on just what we have within ServiceNow. We are collecting, we're filterizing, we're normalizing the events that are coming from all the different tools that will be in an organization. And we're bringing those in, we're running some rules around that to be able to work out what's noise, what's not, what needs to be actioned, and then what that action is. And those actions, for example, tend to be alerts within ServiceNow. So once we've got that, we then can get into that level of detail where we are looking at where the problem is, down to a CI level, down to a particular server, for example, understanding, is it a cluster of servers? Is it a single server that's failing? Is it a single point of failure, which then needs to be addressed in the future? All those things can be seen. We can understand what history there is around there. We can understand if there's been any changes, any other instance, any security instance maybe that's been raised off the back of that particular CI that could be all the effect in this. Everything is one place. It's not kept across multiple systems. And then where we can do the automation, where we can actually remediate problems quickly, we could do those automatically, or you could actually give an operator the choice of maybe one of the 3 things that they might want to do. Again, understanding SLAs is one of the key areas that allows IT to be able to keep within what they need to do for the business, but also then report back how successful they are to the business as well from that side of things. What we've also got is, again, that integration into change. We talked about the fact that you might want to do a remediation, restart a service. That should go through an emergency change, whether it's one that's already been approved or pre-approved, because if the service is down, you probably can't do a lot of danger by restarting it. But again, it's all automated. It can be all audited within ServiceNow. You can understand what's happening. What you can also see, for example, is if a change has taken place which has caused this service to fail, from a ServiceNow perspective, you've then got that view of understanding what those changes are, and you can start to look at doing things like rollbacks, understanding what version maybe somebody's upgraded things to. All that detail exists by using ITSM and the operations management all together. And then, as I said, looking at those delivery insights and understanding how well it's working, how the focus is around failures, how they're being resolved. Is a particular application starting to fail more? And then look at where those failures are beginning to occur. So then you can start to put more of the proactive effort in to either resolving it, maybe upgrading it. And again, there's elements within ServiceNow that you can use around application portfolio management to be able to start to understand the way those applications work. Again, all based around the single record, all based around the ServiceNow platform. No duplicate data, it's all in one place for people to be able to utilize. And here's some examples of some of the customers. Again, you can go to the servicenow.com site to see some more examples and more detail on these particular areas. But you can see it's all the way from hours saved to actually monetary costs to potentially consolidation and allowing service desk personnel to actually do what they're paid to do and not do some of these repetitive tasks from that side of things. Last bit before I go into the demo, it is all about visibility. It's all around the health of these services and understanding how they're working. But the optimization perspective is key as well. So are they working the best they possibly could? We're not bothered whether this is on-premise, on cloud, or a hybrid mix. That's the point. Applications nowadays are across those different areas. It's bringing all that together in that single system of record to get that visibility and to allow the efficiencies to take place to improve problems and make sure that they don't happen as often. And when they do happen, because they still will happen, I worked in IT for 12 years, you never get rid of problems, but the more you can reduce the impact is really what's key from that perspective. And only if you can start to look at this data and be proactive, then ultimately you still potentially having issues, but end users will not see that these particular problems and the business can still carry on. So let's go into the quick demonstration. So here I have the event management dashboard. You can see it's not looking too bad at the moment. There's a lot of green on there. What I'm just going to run very quickly, and then I'll come back to this in a second, is I'm just going to generate some events. So this is just basically generating the typical things that you'd send to ServiceNow to be able to allow you to do some event management. So what you can see from this event management dashboard is we are very business service focused. So these are all about different business services that you can see here. Already got that up. From this perspective, you've got all the different business services and you've got the alerts here. Now we process events, so the events will come into ServiceNow. We use various event rule management within ServiceNow to create alerts. Alerts are actually what we manage within ServiceNow. So here you can see we've got all those ones in here. We're prioritizing them at the moment by business criticality, but you can also see we could do it by cost of service, or we could do it by different business services as well. You can also look at it from a technical services perspective. So if you still have various areas and some silos within your organization that, let's say, just purely focusing on Oracle database, they can get a view of this as well. But ultimately, this is the view you want to be able to see. And as you can see, we've got some alerts coming into the bottom. We're starting to see some potential issues. What's surprising is these alerts are actually affecting multiple business services. And again, if you're looking at siloed tools, that's something you don't always be able to get to see from that particular side of things. So these events will keep coming in over the next couple of minutes. What I'm going to do is, so we can see we've got one now which has gone red. So that's probably the one I need to focus on more. We can see there's again various different alerts, and if we click on these different areas, the alerts will show for those particular business services that we're looking at. We also have some areas where people still want to be able to look at the traditional, what we class really as a sort of alert console. So if they actually want to look at it from some of the traditional type of views, then you can still do that within ServiceNow. So for example, here, you've got lots of different data coming in from this perspective, and you can manage the data from this perspective. And this is continually to refresh. You can consolidate alerts as well. So where you've got multiple alerts coming in, you can actually get a consolidated view of those coming into this as well from that perspective. And you can see here, we've got some different alerts coming in. So if we go into this particular one here, and we click into this alert, you can see in this alert, when it builds, this has actually gone through the event management rules. It's now created an alert off the back of that. I just wait for this to come back. Apologies, I'm actually in the US at the moment, and my instance isn't, so apologies for that. You can see we've taken the alert details in here. We've done some automatic correlation. We've got parents in there, so we've got some consolidation around the different alerts as well to say they're all linked together. We've got a knowledge document which it's tied to, so if we do manual remediation, there's a set of instructions of what you need to do. And then if we go down to this here, we can see we've automatically created an incident. So if you look at this record here, I'm just going to preview it. You can see you've got an incident that's automatically being created through event management, no call, it's happened straight away. Now what I'm going to do on this is just do a little bit of remediation as well. So on this particular one, as an operator, I can right click on this and I can do a quick response. Now what this quick response does is it gives me the ability to look at a number of different options. So if I still want to do a little bit of my swinging from one particular screen to another, I can still go on and I've got links into applications. So if, for example, there's still a particular monitoring tool as an operator I want to use, I can get direct access to it from here. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to run a little bit of orchestration to just attach the Apache log. I know it's an Apache server, so it's giving me that as one of the options, and it will run a piece of workflow all the way through to be able to basically take this data and then pass that into the ticket. So you can see here, it's gone through, it's run a log, and then it's finished from that perspective. Now what that should mean is if I now go back to my alert again, and live demos are always fun on this, and then I go back into my instance, then we should see at the top now, we've got this attachment that's been added, which is basically a log off that particular server. So again, it's gone in, it's brought that data back, and it's now enriched the incident with more data to be able to manage. However, what we wanted to do is look at this really from the new type of view, looking at it from a business service. So I'm going to go back to the event management dashboard. Now I want to start to understand, this is the event, this is the application I need to look at, which is electronic messaging. If I double click into that now, that will take me into the service map view. So this is now looking at all the different elements that make up this business service. Now, it's quite difficult to see, even on the webinar. So let me drill in. The reason we can tell it's service maps, because it's got an arrow at the top, that's the starting point. And here we can see it's going in through maybe a load balancer. It's going in through an Apache web farm, of which there's 2 of those. So again, we can open those up and we can see there's 2 of those in there. Now, what you'll also see is if I just drag this up, is you can see we've overlaid the alerts on top of this particular thing. So the one that we think is the one that's probably likely to cause the most problem, there's multiple ways to be able to look at this. You've got history bar at the top here, is we can start to be able to look at the different areas that we've got. And we can start to look at, for example, if it's updated yet, root cause. The reason I say it's updated, it probably takes about 2 or 3 minutes for it to look at all the data and do some of the analyzing around it. But it thinks it's found a server and it thinks it's 67% likely that that is the root cause. Now, what you'll also see from that is that particular server CI is actually that Apache 6, which is actually the log we brought back earlier on. So I want to know a little bit more about this server. So if I click on this server, you'll notice on the left-hand side of the screen, when it comes back, it's an update. Try again. You'll see here that you've got some application details. You can start to understand what that server is made up of. from both the application, i.e. the Apache side of things, including the version, but you can also go down and understand what hardware it's on. So in this case, it's on a virtual instance. We can also understand, for example, has there been any changes? Multiple ways to be able to do this. We've got a few tabs on the bottom here. You can change that by going onto the top here and switch tabs on and off. So you can have as much open as you want, but the whole point of this is really to minimize the data that you've got on the screen. So we can see has there been any changes. Interestingly, there has been a few changes, but there's nothing really planned at the moment from that perspective. So we've done some recent changes on this. What we can also do is do a comparison view. So if I open this view up here and I click on compare, it will open a comparison view up. So it will compare what this looked like, let's say 3 weeks ago, to what it looks like today. And then you can start to drill into this, and then you'll notice and highlight here, for example, it's shown that there's the various changes on there as well. So again, you can start to understand if things are deleted, if things have been added, they'll all be shown within this comparison view. Let me just push that down again. The other sort of area that we might want to look at is starting to understand some of the data. So from this perspective, I'm now going to just go in and resolve this particular issue. So if I go into here and I right click on here, I have these remediation options. So based on everything that we've seen and all that data, it's now come up with remediation options of what I can do. You can see again, we can bring the error log down. We've already brought that down, so we don't want to do that again. But one thing we can do is restart that Apache server. Again, this will go off, and you potentially would run this maybe automatically without operator input. But this just gives you an idea of, I want to run this. I'm now going to stop a service. I'm now going to do some orchestration. So orchestration is when you go outside ServiceNow. So you could be running a PowerShell script. You could be running SSH. And that's basically now running something that will restart this Apache server. Again, always good practice is if it fails, assign some manual remediation so that somebody goes and maybe does it in more of a manual way and uses that knowledge document that we saw earlier on. If I refresh that, we can see that's now finished. If I go back to here, and again, it takes a couple of seconds to refresh, what we'll see is, hopefully, if we've resolved the problem, these alerts will start to disappear. What we could also do on this particular one here is we could look at a dependency view. Now, one of the ideas of the dependency view is, whereas before we were looking at the business service and what particular elements made up that business service, with a dependency view, the center of the universe now becomes that particular CI. So then we're looking at that CI from the central point of view, and we understand now, based on that CI, which is here, I'll just make it a bit bigger so you can all see it, what's it running and what is dependent on it. So what's it dependent on, what's dependent on it. And just to sort of show this type of view, you can see immediately there are lots and lots of different business services on here, which this particular server is quite key about. So you've got all these different business services. This is again giving this insight to start to understand what that looks like. And you can see now all those events have gone from this particular business application. But when we started this application and we saw those errors, this Apache server actually was responsible in part for all the different issues that we were seeing, because it makes up all of the different business services. So again, immediately you've got two issues here that you need to resolve. One is you've actually got one Apache server that doesn't have a cluster, that if it does fail, it potentially affects between 30 and 40 different business services. If you just looked at that from a CI perspective, you'd find that difficult to get visibility into. So you wouldn't understand the business impact. But in this case, we not only understood that it was affecting one of the key business services within our organization, but also the fact it was affecting multiple business ones within our organization as well. So you can start to be able to resolve and prioritize how you fix things a lot quicker. And in summary, ultimately, the more automation you can put in there, the easier you can make that run. So that's been a very quick demo. Hopefully it's given you a good understanding of the way that works, the way it ties into change, incidents. So you've got that view. You saw the dependency view, so that would allow somebody from an operations perspective or a service desk perspective to be able to understand what the impact is from a individual CI on the business services or service that it's looking at. And I will now hand back to Phil, who will do the next part of the presentation.
Thanks very much, Mark. That was really useful. I'll never get bored of watching those, believe it or not. So just on to the last section of the presentation from myself regarding some best practices and a little bit around the journey of that implementation. So the first slide I just want to touch on, really, I mean, Mark had a much better slide of this, but we want to really re-emphasize this, that it's a journey. And part of why I want to cover this is, obviously we're talking about the fact that it's a physical journey in terms of the implementation steps. So going from discovery potentially into mapping and maybe some automation before bringing in a little bit of event management and through to remediation and orchestration. But also it's important to remember it's a journey in terms of time and investment. And, you know, as with all of these projects, you can make them very simple to start, but they can, you know, depending on the size of your organization, they can be a big complex project. And I feel that it's always important for everyone to be aware of that up front, just so they can make the right provisions within their time and budgets to carry this on. And part of making that journey successful is right at the start, understanding what your goals are. So do you have issues with outages, or are you struggling to maintain certain services, or you have no visibility on those services? And try and come up with some structured metrics and KPIs around those goals, so that when you start implementing a product like ServiceNow ITOM and going through that journey, you can actually take stock and measure, are we getting what we wanted to get now, or do we need to maybe pivot a little bit and try something slightly different within the tool set? A lot of customers can go into this and find themselves kind of in one or several of these phases. Most are kind of in phase one with bits of 2 and 3 scattered about is the typical journey we see. But it goes back to the importance of establishing the single system of record up front, making it the source of truth, and then coming up with your goals and KPIs from there before progressing any further. So the next bit I just want to cover again before this is a little bit of a CMDB 101. So as Mark talked again about earlier, you've got to get that CMDB right first, get that single system of record in there and make sure it's valid. So just some really quick points on CMDB. So first of all, what are the goals that your service aware CMDB will underpin? So why do you need the CMDB? We do actually see some people sometimes that they know they want one, but they don't really know why. And although that's still nice that they know they want one, it makes it very hard to measure the effectiveness or justify maybe an expenditure when you don't know necessarily what your return is going to be, whether tangible or intangible. In terms of the more detailed parts of that CMDB, do you have a documented and approved data model? So when you're approaching your CMDB, always get your data model up front. What are the attributes you need to capture? What are the classes you need to capture those attributes against? Which environments do you need to monitor against? Do you only care about production and you definitely don't care about non-production, etc.? Our general rule of thumb we work to when we try and do this is if the data is never going to be reported on, measured or executed against, then you probably shouldn't bother collecting it to start, at least in phase one. We see a lot of people collecting a lot of data sometimes that they don't really need, and all it does is serves to create an overhead and a bit of a mess sometimes. I think I covered a bit there about which environments. So again, do you just want to target a production or test or non-prod environments? The implications for that are twofold. One is from a licensing perspective, you can potentially use a lot less licenses by only doing production, for example. But from an implementation perspective as well, you can obviously cut these things down and target them and make them much more focused and accelerate the time to get your return. When you're looking at that CMDB at the first phase, what are your data sources? So a very good exercise at the start as part of that data model is where are we getting these attributes from? Are these automated or manual, i.e. are they some kind of discovery tool or integration, or do we need someone's uploading a spreadsheet? Are these updates mandatory? Can we go ahead without some attributes, etc.? Are there any further integrations required to enrich this? So do we need to plug into SCCM? Do we need to plug data in from SolarWinds or NIMSoft or another tool to verify maybe some of your VMware or Linux tools and those kind of things? And one of the other biggest tips we give to people in that design phase is make sure you have data owners. So once you go out and collect all that data and pull it in, somebody needs to own it and make sure that it's accurate and it's kept up to date. And what goes in there is valid. And usually that's going to be different people to necessarily the people that use that data. So moving on, security. So we always tell people get ready early. And even when you start looking at maybe going through the ITOM journey, engage with security. Are you in a particularly stringent or regulated industry? Maybe you're in a highly regulated public sector. body or a highly sensitive finance house, are they going to have more requirements around getting that sign-off position than others? We tend to see everybody get signed off, but that journey can be much shorter for some than others. So get engaged with the chief security officer or the cybersecurity team, get that approval process started and find out how long that's going to take and what's required. Do you have valid credentials for all the appropriate systems? Some of these tools will require administrator access to some level. And again, letting the security team know about that as soon as you can make the whole process go a bit smoother. And the same for firewall changes. How some companies can make them just via change request. Some require top level security sign off to make changes to certain firewall rules. So again, what is the process for those, and find out and make sure you're leaving good time for it. From an architecture perspective, again, we're just covering some very high level things here today, guys, but feel free to reach into us and query any of these in more detail. We're happy to have a call with you at a detailed level, but at a high level, do you have kind of geographical or environment types you want to segment? So going back to the prod or non-prod type situation, or some of our clients, for example, are global on different continents, and it makes logical sense to segment for example, if we talk about discovery, segmenting those environments by geography. Mid servers will be needed in each environment. So the mid server, for those who don't know, is a ServiceNow provided virtual appliance that sits inside the safe zone of a network, and essentially allows ServiceNow to communicate data back and forth with those devices. So the mid server will run those discovery probes out into the environment and pass the data back up to ServiceNow. And any segmented environment will need its own server unless the network permits them to talk through them all. How many CIs you expect to discover? This is going to inform how long the scans will take. So, for example, a recent client of ours who was a global client, their mid servers were placed in one region. There were too many CIs for those mid servers to scan in time, so every night the scans would finish without finishing a full scan. But the schedule would stop. A way around that is making sure that those servers, you can distribute them. So we created some clustered pairs in different geographical regions running different schedules, which then meant they would run much more quicker. They could be staggered start times. They were always finishing on time. And we also clustered them to ensure high availability. So for this particular client, it was essential for them that discovery always ran. Some clients may not worry if it doesn't run for a day, but some will. So again, taking those questions up front and coming up will obviously inform your architectural decisions. Are there going to be any network or routing changes to facilitate the communication? So can the networks talk to each other? Do you use a management network? Those kind of questions. And we move in here to high level design. So these are always a good starting point. So just as early as you can, engaging with the architecture team, getting some high level designs down on paper. And again, these can facilitate discussions further, but also with security, you can kind of go back and say, well, this is what we think this would look like when we put it in. Is there anything we've missed? Just a tiny little bit of a deeper dive into that mid-server and discovery schedule piece. So how often do these scans run? Some clients will run discovery once a week. The most typical we see is daily. So most people like to run their scans overnight and have a refresh. We do have clients who run these multiple times a day. The impact of the network is low when done properly, and they want the most up-to-date CI data as often as possible. Obviously, that informs how many mid-servers you may want and what those schedules look like. You always want to try and make sure your scans can run and complete on time. And if you do get a server failure of some regard or in part of the network, the clustering will allow you to have another server there to pick up that job and make sure you still get your results in. Schedules I've already mentioned, consider splitting these if you have a large environment. One of the most recent clients we did this on had almost 1 million CIs coming in through discovery. So those questions up front can and the answers can inform how you create this, but these are key considerations to make sure you get a smooth implementation on the first run. And that's it for our brief overview on best practices, guys. As I said, it's a very quick overview just for time today, but we're happy to dive into these in a lot more detail with you. So just a quick recap from myself. Remember, it's a journey. You're not going to go in overnight and in 2 or 4 weeks have an all singing, all dancing service mapping implementation. But you can definitely have a nice plan around this and some realistic expectations with working with your partner. Get your config management processes and goals in order. Engage with security and architecture up front. really understand what those schedules and mid-server requirements look like. How do we make sure this all runs smooth? If you get all those things started, get in and accelerate your journey and make ITSM and ITOM better together. So that's my piece for this, guys. I'm going to hand back to Ilse now to talk about some Q&A. And thank you for joining the call.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much, Phil. That was very educational. We have about 5 minutes left, so I'm just going to go over a couple questions from our list. And like I mentioned, don't forget that we will be sending out an email with the recording of the webinar, as well as a copy of this presentation, so you guys have all the information that you need. So one of the questions that I have is, how long is the typical implementation and integration of ITSM and ITOM?
So again, I think I touched on this slightly, but it can be, it's almost how long is a piece of string kind of question. I would always say you're talking about a couple of months to do some kind of discovery and service mapping work. How long that is depends entirely on the size of your organization, the scope of what you want to achieve, and ultimately how much resources can be put into that as well. One of the biggest factors to keep in mind with regarding timescales is the potential resources your company will need to put into this. So a lot of the time we can turn up and we've kind of provided pre-questions, but clients may not have the relevant technical people on hand who need to, troubleshoot a firewall issue or troubleshoot a network issue. So make sure you do get the best timescales possible. Just go back into that planning and make sure that both parties have got as many people ready as they need to get it through. Great. Thank you so much, Phil. So I have one more question, and I think because we don't have a lot of time, we'll do that one to finish. So is the ITOM suite included with the ITSM license? Okay. So as with anything around licensing, we always tell people to speak to their account execs in the first instance. This is quite clear cut though, so no, it's not included. So there's various parts of the suite that need separate licensing. So ITOM is separate to ITSM. Within the suite itself, you can then license various parts. So you may only want discovery and event, for example, in the ITOM standard suite, or you may choose one of the full suites with orchestration, cloud management. But we're happy to have a conversation around that with anyone interested. Okay, thank you so much, Phil. And thanks again, everybody who joined today. If you want to find more information, you can visit flyform.com. And I just want to remind everybody that we'll be at Now Forum 2018 next week. So come visit us at our stand. We will be giving away a virtual reality enabled drone, so you can enter our draw. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Ilse. Thanks everybody for joining. Have a great day.